The city streets hummed with life, a symphony of voices, footsteps, and the clattering of carts. Vendors shouted their wares, children darted between legs, and beggars pressed against the edges of the bustling market, hands outstretched. Amid the chaos, Elena moved like a queen in her own court, tall, impeccably dressed, every step deliberate, precise, commanding attention even as she tried to avoid it. She was 28, striking, with sharp eyes that missed nothing, but too often looked down on what they saw. Her tailored coat, polished heels, and a glint of her bracelet announced wealth. She passed the crowded market with the swift judgment of someone used to deciding value in an instant. To her, everything had its place, the polished, the beautiful, the refined, and everything else was beneath her notice. Elena's life had been a careful climb. Her career was flourishing, her social calendar full, her apartment a display of luxury and taste. Yet, despite every achievement, she carried a quiet unease, a shadow she refused to acknowledge. Behind her confidence lay a loneliness, the kind that grows from doors closed too soon and words left unspoken. The death of her father 3 years ago had left a hollow that no party, promotion, or luxury could fill. She buried it with pride, masking grief under laughter and scorn for weakness. Her relationships reflected this pattern. Friends, if they could even be called that, admired her, followed her lead, but rarely challenged her. They avoided the cracks she hid, the moments when pride faltered and regret peeped through. Family had become distant. Her mother, subdued and quiet, lived in a different city now, and Elena hadn't called in weeks. Her father's absence was a wound she barely recognized, disguised by ambition and self-importance. As she walked through the market, her eyes flicked over the crowded stalls, but her attention was caught by small annoyances: a boy selling trinkets, a woman haggling too slowly, a man shouting over everyone. She snorted at their clumsiness, shaking her head with mild amusement, unaware of the growing unease in her chest. Then, at the corner of the square, she saw him. An old man, bent and frail, hunched over a crumpled coat that smelled of rain and neglect. His hands trembled as he gathered a few coins, his face lined with age and sorrow. He didn't ask loudly for alms, didn't call her over. He simply existed, fragile and weary, on the edge of the bustling world she dominated. Elena laughed softly, almost without thinking, a laugh that was sharp, dismissive, cruel in its casualness. She didn't even slow her steps, but her eyes lingered, not out of concern, but out of a sense of detached superiority. How pathetic, she thought. How unnecessary to exist like that. The man looked up, and for a moment, something passed between them, something she couldn't name. There was sorrow in his gaze, yes, but also an odd calm, a quiet strength. It made her chest tighten unexpectedly, an echo she couldn't explain. She turned away quickly, forcing herself to focus on the market, on her list, on the busy world that always demanded her attention. A subtle shiver ran down her spine, though she convinced herself it was nothing. The morning air was chilly, that was all. She pressed on, heels clicking against cobblestones, avoiding the scraps of life that felt uncomfortable to acknowledge. Still, the image of the old man lingered, stubborn and uninvited. As she walked further, she caught glimpses of a life she had ignored. A mother arguing softly with a child, a couple holding hands tightly, a street musician playing a song that tugged at the corners of memory. The moments seemed insignificant to anyone else, but to her, they stirred something buried, a quiet, guilty longing for connection she no longer allowed herself to feel. And then, a single thought pierced her consciousness. Unbidden, I could have helped him. She shook her head violently, banishing it. No, she had her life to run, her image to maintain, her plans to execute. She could not, would not, stop for someone like him. And yet, as she merged back into the stream of shoppers, the thought persisted, shadowing the edge of her prideful certainty. Elena paused at the fountain in the center of the market. Water splashed softly against stone, a simple rhythm, calming yet haunting in its quiet constancy. She stared at her reflection in the rippling water, at the sharp lines of her face, the polished composure she wore like armor. For a brief, fleeting moment, the laughter that had rolled so easily over the old man's misery faltered. For a moment, she saw not a successful woman, but a daughter, alone, proud, and yearning for something she could no longer name. Then, as quickly as it came, the feeling passed. She straightened, adjusted her coat, and stepped back into the current of life around her. There would be time later to think of these things, if there ever was. For now, the market demanded her movement, her attention, her sharp, unrelenting eye. And yet, deep inside, a quiet voice waited, patient and insistent. A voice that would not be silenced, no matter how much pride or ambition she wielded. The story had begun. Elena turned a corner and found herself in a quieter part of the market. The chatter faded slightly, replaced by the scraping of old wooden carts and the soft shuffle of worn shoes against stone. Shadows stretched across the alley, cast by uneven buildings, and the warmth of the morning sun felt weaker here. He was there, sitting on the edge of a wooden crate, a poor, ragged old man, more frail than she had noticed before. His clothes hung off his bones, patched in countless places threadbare and gray. His face was lined with age, every wrinkle a story, every sunken eye a quiet suffering. A small tin cup lay in front of him, its surface dull and battered, and his hands trembled as he lifted it, as if even that simple movement was exhausting. He looked up at her as she passed. There was no pleading, no sharp cry for attention, only a gaze that held her for a heartbeat too long. And in that gaze, she felt something she had not felt in years, a pang, unshaped and sudden, like the echo of a long-forgotten memory. Elena's first reaction was laughter, a small, sharp, incredulous sound that bounced off the brick walls. Really? This is what passes for life, she thought, her chest rising with mockery. She had worked too hard, struggled too much, endured too many long nights and harsh words, to stoop to this level of weakness. She shook her head, turned slightly, and began to walk past, heels clicking against the uneven cobblestones. The old man's voice was quiet, almost fragile. "Do not laugh at me, child," he said, a rasp of years and wind. "There is more to you than you see, and more to me than I appear." Elena paused, the words brushing against her ears like a cold wind, but she dismissed them. How odd, how irritating, she thought. Pride and habit pushed her forward, urging her to ignore what she could not understand. Yet, as she stepped away, a strange sensation prickled along her spine, a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air, a sense that she had been here before, that she had seen him, not in this life, perhaps, but somewhere buried deep in memory. "Please," the old man continued, softer this time, almost whispering, "do not turn away. You have forgotten what matters, but it is not too late to remember." Elena's laugh hardened. She straightened her coat and glanced back once, the curiosity barely flickering, the empathy she might have had smothered by arrogance. "I don't have time for," she began, then cut herself off. What did she even say? This old man, sitting there, spoke riddles as if the world depended on her attention. She shook her head again, forcing herself to focus on the market, on the errands, on the life she had built so carefully. Yet the image of him lingered. She tried to brush it off as a trick of the eye, a trick of memory. But every step she took away from him made her feel a little lighter, and yet a little heavier too, as if the world had shifted slightly, leaving a hollow where certainty used to live. By the time she returned to her apartment, Elena's thoughts refused to settle. She tossed her bag onto the polished table, paced a few steps, and stared out the window at the city below. The sky had dimmed slightly, clouds creeping in where the sun had been. She felt an odd tightness in her chest, a trembling she could not explain. That old man, his calm, sorrowful eyes, kept returning in flashes. And with him, the faint, unshakable echo of another voice. The voice of someone she had loved and lost, someone whose absence she had never truly faced. Sleep came slowly that night. In the quiet dark of her bedroom, Elena found herself haunted by fragmented visions. She saw her father, not as he had died, but alive, standing silently behind her, watching her with disappointment and sorrow. She reached out, and he vanished, replaced by the face of the old man, whose gaze seemed to pierce through every layer of armor she had built around herself. She awoke suddenly, heart racing, sheets tangled around her, unsure if the vision had been dream or memory. The unease followed her through the morning, a whisper in her mind, a question without words. What have you forgotten, Elena? What did you turn away from? She told herself it was nothing. It had to be superstition, fatigue, imagination, any excuse to keep her carefully maintained life intact. But deep down, the faint, persistent sense of guilt gnawed at her, the first real hint that the world she thought she controlled had already begun to crack. Elena dressed and left her apartment with a forced air of normalcy. Yet every sound in the market, the clatter of coins, the laughter of children, the shouts of vendors, echoed with subtle menace. She felt watched, even in the middle of the crowd. And somewhere, in the periphery of her mind, she knew that the old man was still there, waiting. And this time, she could not walk away so easily. The sky had darkened by late afternoon, clouds rolling in heavy and gray. Rain threatened, a soft, oppressive weight that made the city feel smaller, narrower, almost confining. Elena moved quickly, heels splashing in shallow puddles, trying to shake off the lingering unease that had haunted her since the morning. The image of the old man, frail and sorrowful, had embedded itself into her mind. She told herself it was coincidence. She told herself she was imagining things. Yet a tight knot of fear had taken root in her chest, and no amount of rationalizing could loosen it. She turned down a narrow alley, seeking a shortcut she had never taken before. The air was heavier here, damp and cold, carrying the faint scent of wet stone and decay. Shadows clung to the walls like living things, and for a moment, she felt exposed, vulnerable, as if the bustling city beyond the alley had disappeared entirely. Then he was there, the old man, not seated this time, but standing, as if he had been waiting for her all along. The tin cup was gone, the hunched posture slightly straighter, though still frail. His eyes locked on hers, calm and unyielding, yet filled with a sorrow that pierced deeper than any words could. "Child," he said, his voice carrying weight she could not place. "You cannot run from what has been buried." Elena stopped, swallowing hard. She wanted to step around him, to turn and leave, to retreat into the safety of her pride and distance. But something held her. Not fear exactly, not recognition yet. Something deeper, harder to name. A pull, a tremor beneath her chest that whispered of unfinished business, of guilt unclaimed. The man stepped closer. His form seemed to shimmer in the dim light, the outline blurring, folding in on itself. Elena's breath caught. She stumbled back, gripping the edge of a wet wall for support. The air seemed charged, electric, tense with a force she could not name. And then she saw him, not the old man, not the ragged figure, but her father. Alive, real, standing before her with the same gentle eyes she remembered, the same calm, reassuring posture that had once been her anchor in childhood storms. Her knees nearly gave out. "No, this can't." Her voice cracked, disbelief shattering the edges of her control. "It's impossible." But it was him. Every line of his face, every familiar gesture, every small smile she had once loved was there. And yet there was something different, a weight, a quiet authority that seemed almost otherworldly, as if he had come not just from memory, but from somewhere beyond memory. Elena's mind raced, heart hammering violently. Dream, nightmare, hallucination. I'm losing it. She wanted to close her eyes, to cover her face, to escape. But she could not. The presence held her, anchored her to the wet alley, to the moment, to the truth she had denied for too long. "Do you remember me, Elena?" His voice was soft, yet it cut through every lie she had told herself. Do you remember who you are when you hide behind pride and arrogance? Tears welled in her eyes. She shook her head, unable to speak. Her chest tightened with grief and guilt so acute it threatened to crush her. The years of pushing people away, of hiding behind her accomplishments, of laughing at what she deemed weakness, all of it pressed down on her now, in a torrent she could not resist. Flashbacks surged unbidden. She saw herself, young and defiant, standing stubbornly while her father offered guidance she refused to hear. She remembered the small kindnesses she had ignored, the quiet sacrifices he had made, the words of love she had never allowed herself to hear. Every memory now carried a sharp edge, a painful reminder of what she had lost through pride and negligence. Her father's gaze softened, but it did not waver. "Elena," he said gently, "do you see now? You have turned away from what matters. You have mocked those in need, ignored the suffering of others, and yet you have also forgotten yourself. You are not beyond redemption, but you must see the truth of your own heart." Her voice broke. She wanted to explain, to excuse herself, to cling to the armor of her old pride. But it fell away in the storm of emotion. The guilt, the sorrow, the longing, it all poured out in a choked sob. "I didn't know. I didn't see." "You did," he interrupted softly. "You always knew, but you were afraid. Afraid to face the grief, afraid to face yourself. And so you laughed at the old man, at weakness, because you could not face your own heart." Elena sank to the wet stone floor, shivering, drenched by the rain that had begun to fall. She pressed her hands to her face, trying to stem the flood of tears. I miss you," she whispered, voice trembling. I was so angry, and now it's too late." Her father knelt beside her, hands hovering, not touching yet radiating warmth. "No, my child," he said softly. "It is never too late to see, to feel, to change. You have a choice now. The world is still before you, if you can meet it with courage, with humility, with love." Elena looked up through tear-streaked eyes. The old man's presence, her father's form, the shadows and rain, they all seemed to swirl together, a single, undeniable truth. This is real. Her mind screamed for explanation, for reason, but there was none. Only this, the confrontation with herself, with her past, with her father, with her guilt. She tried to stand, to run, to escape the impossible, but the weight of the moment pinned her in place. Every instinct that had kept her safe, every habit of pride, of turning away, of mocking, was powerless. Here, she was forced to confront what she had ignored for years. "Do you understand now?" Her father's voice was quiet, yet echoed in every part of her being. "Do you understand what you have done, and what you must do?" Elena nodded weakly, tears slipping freely. The storm outside was nothing compared to the tempest inside her. She trembled with grief, with regret, with the raw awareness of her flaws. And yet, somewhere beneath it all, a seed of hope began to take root. For the first time in years, Elena saw herself not as perfect, not as untouchable, but as a daughter in need of guidance, a human being capable of change, capable of love, capable of facing the truth she had long denied. The rain fell harder, washing over her, washing over the alley, washing over the first traces of her arrogance. And in that cleansing downpour, she knew one thing. Nothing would ever be the same again. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving the alley slick and glistening under the dim, gray light. Elena sat on the cold stone, shivering, tears streaming down her face, yet unable to look away from the figure of her father, both familiar and impossibly strange in the storm's haze. The presence of the old man's energy, interwoven with her father's image, pressed against her chest, and she felt a vulnerability she had not known in years. Her father's gaze softened, but it carried a quiet authority. "Elena," he said, voice steady yet tender, "you must stop hiding behind who you think you are and face who you truly are." Elena shook her head violently. I can't. I've always been so strong. I've done everything I can." Her voice faltered, the carefully constructed walls of pride crumbling with each word. I didn't mean to be so cold. You always knew, he replied softly, taking a step closer. You knew the pain, the loneliness, the suffering, and you turned away. You laughed at those who suffered because you were afraid to confront your own grief. The words struck her like lightning. Her knees gave out completely, and she collapsed to the rain-slicked stones. Images flooded her mind, unbidden, relentless. Her father sitting silently in the living room, reading the newspaper while she sulked in childish anger. The afternoons he had spent teaching her patience, guiding her through mistakes she now remembered with shame. The small sacrifices she had ignored, thinking herself too clever, too busy, too strong. I didn't know, she whispered broken. I didn't see. I laughed at him, added others. I was cruel and You saw. He interrupted gently but firmly. And yet you turned away. That is the weight of pride, of fear. But seeing is not enough. You must feel, you must act, and you must change. This is the chance you have, Elena. The second chance. Her sobs grew, mingling with the soft patter of rain on stone and rooftops. She pressed her hands to her face, shaking with guilt, grief, and the raw, sharp realization of everything she had lost in her arrogance. Everything I've pushed away, everything I've ignored. Her father knelt beside her, but the distance remained, not threatening, yet impossible to cross. I did not leave you to abandon you, he said. I left you to grow, to understand, to choose. But you must now see the truth yourself. The world, your life, your heart, they're all intertwined. Compassion, humility, empathy. These are the pillars you abandoned. You can rebuild them, but only if you confront yourself. Elena's mind spun. She saw herself in moments she had once deemed insignificant. A beggar on the street whose hand she had dismissed, a friend asking for honesty she had avoided, a mother reaching for connection that she had rebuffed. Every memory was now tinged with shame. Every decision she had made replayed with unbearable clarity. I want to, she stammered, voice choked. I want to fix it. I don't want to be this person anymore. I don't. Her father extended his hand, not to touch, but to offer guidance. Then begin, Elena. Begin with honesty, begin with humility. Accept the pain, accept the regret, and allow yourself to love again. Only then will the world open to you. The rain continued to fall, washing over the alley and over Elena. And with it came a strange clarity, as if the storm had carried away not just the physical grime, but the emotional layer she had built over herself. She felt her pride falter, then crumble entirely, replaced by the raw, unfiltered awareness of her flaws, her loneliness, her need for connection. Tears ran freely down her cheeks, but in them was not only grief, but the faint glimmer of hope. The ache in her chest was real, but it carried a message. She could change. She could atone. She could heal. She could rebuild. The road would be difficult, longer than she could imagine, but it existed. For the first time in years, Elena felt the weight of her own heart and the lightness of finally acknowledging it. Her father watched, silent now, allowing her to confront herself fully. She relived the tender memories she had ignored, the evenings he had read stories with her, the quiet lessons in patience and empathy, the moments of laughter and warmth she had taken for granted. Each memory was a shard of the truth she had avoided. That love and connection mattered more than pride, and humility was not weakness but courage. I understand, she whispered at last. I see. I see now. I'm sorry for everything. Her father's lips curved into a faint, approving smile. Then you have begun, he said softly. It is not the end, Elena, but it is the beginning. Let this realization guide you. Let it shape you, and you will not be lost again. The storm began to break. Light peeked through the clouds, soft and golden, illuminating the wet stones and Elena's tear-streaked face. She sat there for a long moment, shivering, exhausted, yet lighter in some indefinable way. The raw confrontation with herself, with her past, with her grief, had brought her to a fragile peace. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. She would not run. She would not hide. She would face the consequences of her pride and begin to make amends, one step at a time. And somewhere in the quiet space between the rain and the slowly brightening sky, she knew her father was watching, guiding, and waiting, not as the one she had lost, but as the one who had always believed in her. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the soft glow of the afternoon sun. Elena stepped out of the alley, her coat damp, her hair plastered to her face, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. The encounter with her father, or the old man, or both, still lingered in her mind, sharp and vivid. She could still feel the weight of his gaze, the quiet insistence that she change, that she face herself. And, for the first time, she wanted to, truly wanted to. She walked through the market again, this time slower, her eyes scanning the crowd, not with judgment, but with curiosity and openness. She noticed the small things she had always ignored. A mother soothing a crying child, a man selling bread with a smile, the worn hands of a beggar cup for coins. Her first instinct to dismiss these sights faded, replaced by something else, a stirring of empathy, a pang of recognition. When she saw the old man again, sitting quietly at the corner of the square, she stopped. For a moment, fear and disbelief returned, but then she stepped closer, offering him a small smile. Genuine this time. Without hesitation, she reached into her bag and placed a few coins into his hand, careful not to speak, only acknowledging his presence. "Thank you," he said softly, eyes twinkling, and for the first time, Elena understood that gratitude could be a bridge, a connection, even between strangers. She continued through the market, her mind alive with reflection. She thought of her mother, distant and quiet, and resolved to call her, to check in, to bridge the years of silence. She thought of friends she had neglected, colleagues she had dismissed, people she had treated with arrogance or indifference. She wanted to reach out, to apologize, to show the humility she had learned in the rain-soaked alley. By the time she returned to her apartment, she carried more than her damp coat and bag. She carried purpose. She sat at her desk and pulled out her old journal, the one she had abandoned during the years of ambition and pride. For hours, she wrote, pouring her thoughts onto the pages. The grief she had hidden, the guilt she had ignored, the lessons her father had forced her to confront. Every word was a step toward healing. Every sentence a small act of redemption. In her hand rested a small keepsake, an old pocket watch her father had once given her, long forgotten in a drawer. She held it now, feeling the weight of memory and love, the continuity of connection that could not be broken by death or absence. It became a symbol of her transformation, a reminder of the lessons she had learned and the life she had yet to live with purpose and empathy. Over the following days, Elena's actions began to mirror her internal change. She helped neighbors with small kindnesses, volunteered her time at a local shelter, and reached out to friends she had abandoned in her pride. With each act, she felt her heart grow lighter, her chest less tight, her mind clearer. The arrogance that had once defined her was replaced by something stronger, quieter, humility, compassion, and the courage to be vulnerable. Even her relationship with her mother began to heal. Elena called, hesitated, then spoke honestly, admitting her failures, expressing her love, and listening in ways she had never learned before. The conversation was awkward at first, heavy with unspoken words and past resentments, but gradually, warmth returned, tentative yet real. It was a first step, but a significant one. At night, she would return to the memory of the alley, of the rain, and of her father's eyes. She no longer felt fear, only gratitude. She had been given a chance to confront herself, to see the truth of her heart, and to choose a different path. She clutched the old pocket watch to her chest and whispered a quiet promise, to honor the lessons she had learned, to live fully, and to never again let pride blind her to what truly matters. One evening, as she walked through a quiet street, she noticed a small act of kindness between strangers. A man helping a woman lift a heavy crate. A smile touched her lips. She felt an inexplicable warmth, a sense of continuity, as if the world itself had shifted, just a little, to reflect the changes inside her. The lesson had taken root, and she could feel its growth with every step she took. Elena knew the path ahead would not always be easy. There would be moments of doubt, moments when her old pride might whisper, tempting her to retreat. But the encounter in the alley, the confrontation with her father, had shown her the power of honesty, of empathy, of humility. She would meet the world not with scorn, but with openness, not with judgment, but with understanding. And for the first time in a long time, Elena felt truly alive. The sun had settled into a warm, golden glow, brushing the city in soft light. The streets were quieter than the busy mornings Elena had once known, the chaos softened by the late afternoon calm. She walked slowly, her steps deliberate, mindful of the lives passing around her, not with judgment, but with curiosity and compassion. At the corner of a familiar street, she saw him, a poor old man, seated on a small crate, a tin cup at his feet. His clothes were worn and patched, his hands trembled slightly, but there was a dignity in his posture, an ease in the way he met the world. Elena paused. For a moment, the memory of the alley, the rain, and her father's gaze pressed against her heart. But now, there was no fear, no shock, only understanding. She stepped closer, her pace slow, respectful. When she reached him, she knelt slightly, placing her hands gently on the cup and filling it with coins. The old man looked up, surprised, then smiled, a quiet, approving smile that seemed to carry recognition, even gratitude. "Thank you," he murmured. His voice was calm, steady, and yet it seemed to echo something deeper, a resonance of lessons learned long ago. Elena smiled softly, a warmth blooming in her chest. "You're welcome," she said, her voice steady. She realized it wasn't just about the coins. It was about acknowledgement, connection, the simple act of seeing someone fully and offering care without expectation. As she stood, she glanced at the city around her, the children running, the vendors calling, the couples walking hand in hand. Everything felt familiar, yet changed. The world had not shifted, but she had. Her steps felt lighter, her mind clearer, and her heart more open than it had been in years. She thought of her father, of the alley, of the rain, and the transformation that had begun that day. She whispered a quiet promise to herself, to live fully, to love openly, to act with compassion, and to honor the lessons she had been given. A soft breeze rustled through the street, carrying with it a faint sense of presence, comforting and unseen. Elena's lips curved into a small smile. She did not need to see him to know he was there, guiding her still. And with that, she continued walking, not hurried, not focused on status or appearances, but moving deliberately, embracing the life she had been given, aware of the fragility of time and the power of choice. She had laughed at a poor old man once, but now she had learned to see, to understand, to care. And in that simple human act, she had finally come full circle. For Elena, the journey was not over. It had only just begun, but she was ready.